All right. Well, it's looking like people are more or less here. Thank you for coming to this week's Tech Talk. As you guys probably know, this is on ArcGIS Business Analyst, a tool for mapping all sorts of demographic and psychographic data for different applications in sociology and economics and that sort of thing. This week's presenter is Jylisa Kenyon, our social sciences librarian for class. She covers political science, culture, society, and justice, all sorts of things. And we look forward to hearing from you. So, Jylisa, take it away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to speak with you today about ArcGIS Business Analyst. I am by no means an ArcGIS expert or really an ArcGIS user before kind of jumping into this tool. I was kind of working with students who needed psychographic data for a journalism, like a marketing and advertising assignment in a journalism class. And we really struggled to kind of get them the data that they needed at the geographic kind of specificity they were interested in. And my colleague, Bruce Godfrey, who's on the call, mentioned business analyst in an ArcGIS kind of general presentation. And so I dove into it and really found it to be an incredibly useful tool for that type of data gathering and presentation. And what I really like about it is you don't need to kind of have a lot of background in how to use ArcGIS or those mapping tools. You can, and that could probably help you be a more advanced user. But you can really jump in kind of from the ground level and start generating some of the data that you might be interested in. So what we're going to do today is I have a brief kind of presentation that's just going to step you through some of the features. And then it's going to just be mostly demo. So demoing the tool and showing you some of the different features that are available and the ways that you can use it. There'll be time for questions at the end if you have any. But one of the great things about pretty much all of the ArcGIS apps is there's a lot of really good help documentation online. There's guided tours within Business Analyst, and you can check out Norm's recording from last week, which was how to find assistance with ArcGIS related issues if you can't find those in some of the basic kind of documentation resources. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you all can see what I'm looking at here. Okay, I'm going to minimize the video portion so that it doesn't cover my screen as much. But if anyone has questions throughout, please feel free to raise your hand, put them in the chat. I'll try and keep an eye on those. But if something relevant comes up that I missed, Norm, please feel free to interrupt me as we go forward. Okay, so the slides are available online. Here's a link for you all if you want to save a copy. As I mentioned, what we're covering today is just some kind of key basic information about ArcGIS Business Analyst, how to access it, and then doing some of the key tasks within this tool. So we're going to talk about creating a project and defining a geographic area, running an infographic and report, creating different types of maps and analyses, creating templates so you can have your own infographics and reports for the variables you're interested in, as well as sharing projects. So ArcGIS Business Analyst is a web app, browser-based, that applies GIS technology to extensive demographic, consumer spending, and business data, allowing you and other users to map locations, perform analysis, and create reports and infographics. In my experience, as I mentioned, it's pretty easy to learn. There's so much you can do and more that I'm going to share with you today. But it is pretty easy to learn, and I've had success going into classes and kind of demonstrating this to upper division students, and they've been able to utilize it for their own assignments as well. ArcGIS Business Analyst includes over 15,000 variable options for more than 130 countries. The variable options are most robust for the US data, but there are options available and some data available for other countries as well. For the demonstration purposes today, I'm going to focus on the US data because that gives you kind of the broadest scope and broadest view of what you can do in ArcGIS Business Analyst. But I'd encourage you to explore some of the other geographic locations to see some of the other options that are available too. So data sources include Esri, which is the kind of creator and provider of ArcGIS products, the US government, and that includes things like the Census Bureau, the American Community Survey, Consumer Expenditure Surveys, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. GFK MRI. So for the folks in the College of Business who are on this call, that might be familiar to you. Infograph as well as SafeGraph. More details about these data sources is available in this footnote link. Data fall into various categories. So we have basic demographic data, consumer spending, tapestry segmentation, which can be really interesting if you're looking at creating personas or identifying personas for specific geographic areas, market potential data, business locations and summary data, as well as some Esri base maps. So if you're digging more into some of the GIS portion of those tools, those base maps can be useful. The resources available within ArcGIS Business Analyst are really easy to find. Once you're within that tool, there's the help icon. From there, you can get to the guided tours, the help documentation, as well as within the documentation, there's information on essential vocabulary, which can be really useful as you're digging into some of these tools, as well as the data and the variables, to make sure that you and your students, if you share this with them, have a shared understanding of what this terminology means. Within ArcGIS Business Analyst, for most of the tasks I'm going to show you today, they have embedded videos that you can watch and see someone else demonstrate how to do this, do those specific features. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and minimize that PowerPoint, and we will just jump into ArcGIS Business Analyst. So to get there, you can start on the library's homepage. You'll click Find, click Geospatial Resources, and then click Software. So this is where you'll come to get access to all of, get information on how to access the various Esri tools and apps that are available to you. What we're going to access today, though, is ArcGIS Online, and we're going to click Sign into the U of I's Teaching and Scholarly Research Portal. So you can access ArcGIS Online and all of its associated apps through your browser when you're on campus or off campus. You'll just click here to sign in using your Vandal Net ID. I'm already signed in through the Edge browser, so it's going to automatically take me there. And this is potentially the landing page you'll see is here for kind of our organizational landing page. You'll see some of the newest members. You'll see some data groups. You'll see Bruce Godfrey, who's on this call and is kind of the main administrative contact. Norm is also a contact too if you have any kind of major issues with the ArcGIS tools. One thing to kind of note is that there's going to be multiple apps that are available for you through this 9-dot icon here. We're going to focus on Business Analyst today, but some of these other apps might be relevant to you as well. Community Analyst is very similar to Business Analyst, but it is being sunsetted at the end of January 2026. So they're encouraging folks to move over to Business Analyst, which has a lot of similar functionality to what Community Analyst was able to do. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into Business Analyst. You would normally click this link, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time for it to load. So what I'm going to do is I already have it open. So we're just going to jump over here. The first time you access ArcGIS Business Analyst, it's going to ask you if you want to update your profile by adding an image. I chose not to. And it's going to automatically have you create a project. If you don't want to do that right away, you want to maybe explore a little bit, you can hit the escape key on your keyboard. But it's going to want you to create a project before you can start doing anything. Before we do that, though, here is this little help icon. This is where you'll find support, guided tours, help documentation, lots of information about this tool. Okay, so let's go ahead and just create a new project. I'm just going to name it Data Hub Tech Talk. I'm not going to add any customizable project attributes. As you dig into this tool, you might choose to do so, maybe by specifying kind of some of these areas that you're interested in. But I'm just going to go ahead and create this project. So one thing to note, and we probably won't demonstrate this today, though, is you can delete projects from ArcGIS Business Analyst, but it won't let you delete a project if you're currently within it. So if you want to delete a project that you're currently working in, it'll need you to navigate to a different project or kind of do it outside of the Business Analyst tool because it won't let you delete something you're currently working on. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open this project. Over here on the left is some of the kind of geographic data that's associated with the project. We don't have anything right now, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. And it is defaulting to Moscow since that was kind of my last map location as I was testing. If we zoom out, we can see, the entire US, we can see other countries depending on what we're interested in. But we're going to focus mostly on Moscow today, just for demonstration purposes. This icon right here is base maps. So if you really want your base map to look a certain way, because there are options to kind of save some of the data we're looking at within the maps, you can have that type of presentation, and maybe you want your map to look a certain way, you can choose that. I'm just kind of doing the basic navigation map that you see in Google Maps or some of those other tools. Up here at the top is where you can choose your data source. As I mentioned, we're going to be focusing on the USA today, but you can browse kind of at the continent level and then go to specific countries. The availability, though, of the variables in the data is going to really depend on the data source you're looking at. So the majority of the data that we're going to, that Esri makes available through Business Analyst is available within this US filter. But if we're jumping to other countries, the data availability is going to change. So just keep that in mind as you're working through this. So the first thing we're going to do is define an area. Before we can run any infographics or reports, we have to give Business Analyst a specific geographic location. So we're going to click Define an Area, and then we're going to create the type of site we want. So you can find a location. You could do it via an address, a zip code, and then you can add concentric rings around it based on drive times or walk times. If that's of interest to you based on how you maybe want to compare the data you're pulling. You could look at just a specific geographic location, county, zip code, congressional district, state. You can also draw your own polygon and kind of create your own area. So maybe you wanted to draw the area between WSU and the U of I. You could draw your own area that way. What we're going to do, though, is I'm going to do find a location. And I'm just going to enter University of Idaho Library. Here's where we can add an area. So we could do those concentric rings based on number of miles. We could do things like drive time or walk time. So if you're looking at something maybe from a marketing or advertising perspective, you might want to do something like drive time. I'm just going to do the concentric rings based on miles, but I'm going to change it to 3, 6, and 9 just for the sake of demonstration. And I'm going to apply this location. So we can see it mapped here. I'm going to click Finish just so that goes away. And this is where we see some of the features that we can run. So our first option that I'm going to use is an infographic. Business Analyst has a lot of kind of out-of-the-box infographics. So they have standard infographics and gallery infographics, which present the information in slightly different ways. For any of these infographics, you can hover over the eye and it will give you a brief description, which can be helpful. Often this tells you what the infographic is going to include, as well as the data sources. You can also hover over the preview icon and get an idea of what this looks like. And in a couple of minutes, we're going to look at how you can take these initial infographics and edit them, maybe add in different variables or change how they look to better meet your needs. But this is what kind of the standard infographic is going to look like. So we can scroll down and choose any of these. And maybe what I'm going to choose is a community summary, which is going to give us some demographic information here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that and run the infographic. So here's the infographic for that first area that we chose, which was 3 miles. We could choose different areas and see how it's going, how the data are going to change as we move through that those rings. We can also do a side-by-side comparison if we choose to do so. Some of these options or these variables have this explore for more option. You can click on those and get more information there. You can also add filters if you choose to do so. So let's just change it to the 9 miles so you can see how this data changes. Within the Moscow area, it probably isn't changing that much, maybe less than we would see in other cities. We might see more changes with a different infographic if we wanted to look at that. So we can easily, from the screen, click this infographic dropdown and change to something else. So maybe we might look at the target market summary. So this is, again, giving us this data, but it's giving us some lifestyle spending information, as well as some of that tapestry segmentation or personas that we might be interested in. We can click on these and learn a little bit more. And if we click on, especially for these tapestry segments, this view full segment profile, it'll give you information on how these segments are defined by Esri and ArcGIS Business Analyst. So let's go back to this Run Infographics page. You can export the infographics that you create as PDFs, images, dynamic HTMLs, or as Excel files. And then you can kind of use those and distribute them as you need to. You can also edit the infographic, and that's where you can start getting into kind of making it your own so that it meets your needs. But I'm going to go ahead and cancel that and jump back to where we were here. So from this area, we can also run some of the out-of-the-box reports. The reports are going to look a little bit different. The infographics, of course, are more graphical in nature, so they include bar charts and potentially photos and other information that's presented maybe in a more visually appealing way. The reports are really going to be focused on the data and the numbers. So again, we have some standard reports as well as a field for my reports for some of the ones that I've created. But we can jump into any of these that we are interested in. So maybe we want to look at the health and beauty market potential. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and you can choose how to export that report, either as a PDF or as an Excel file. So let's go ahead and export it as a PDF file. Hopefully it doesn't take too long, and we can grab that and see what it looks like. Okay, so here is it exported as an Excel file. So it's showing us some of this data for our geographic area. So we have the 3-mile radius, the 6-mile radius, and if we scroll through that 9-mile radius, again, this will look different if you chose a geographic area rather than the radius option or the polygon option. But it's telling you for this area, some of these consumer behaviors, the expected number of adults, the percentage, as well as this MPI. So this is an index value that's comparing the data for our geographic area to the entire United States. So if the value here is greater than 100, it means that folks in this geographic area are more likely to engage in that behavior. So more likely to spend 1 to 3 hours exercising. If it's less than 100, that means they're less likely to engage in that behavior, or in this case, own a treadmill, than the rest of the United States on average. So that's the count, the percent, and the index value are different ways to kind of compare your data and to look at it and potentially analyze it. Once you have this Excel file, if you wanted to, of course, you could do other things like create pivot tables or graphs to represent this data. The PDF looks very similar, except there's going to be multiple pages and more kind of vertical scrolling than what you see here in the Excel file. Any questions about the out-of-the-box infographics or reports before we move on to information just on how to kind of create your own? Okay, cool. So we kind of got to that point when I clicked out on editing the infographic, but to get there otherwise, you'll click reports and you'll click, it's remembering that we were here already, but in the future, you'll click reports, build reports, and then build infographic or build a report, depending on how you want to present the data you're looking at. I'm going to go to build an infographic, and here are the standard templates. So if there's something about one of these templates that you want to change, you could definitely do that. So we could jump into maybe the like the employment overview one, or the commute profile, we could look at that and maybe switch out one of the variables if we chose to. We could also start with a blank template and make our own completely from scratch. So I'm going to do that just because it's a little easier to visualize as we're adding in those variables. So when I open this, we pretty much have full control over what this looks like. When we go to add something to this infographic that we're creating, we have the option of adding a chart, an image, text, infographic, table, map, nearby, or interesting facts. We can also add panels from other templates and just kind of merge those directly over. So let's go ahead and maybe add a chart. Once you start adding in these elements, that's when you're able to see the data browser. There's really no other way, unless you're looking at editing an infographic or a report or kind of viewing that, to see the variables in this format. The help documentation steps you through the data that are available and provides more detail, but there's really no browsable way to look at the data unless you're working within an infographic or a report. So they organize the data based on large categories. So we have things like population, age, housing, education, business, spending. As we go through, we start getting some of that data related to behaviors and psychographics, and then some of the other information that might be relevant based on your data need. So you can explore based on category. You could click into any of these and kind of see what's available. So we have things like the popular variables. A lot of the psychographic data is based on kind of a Likert scale of disagree completely, somewhat, agree completely. But we also have things like, have you seen a video ad, or have you done this thing in the last 30 days or the last year? So just keep that in mind as you're looking through these variables. The way that they're asking the questions and gathering the data is going to change across the category, especially when the data isn't gathered by the US government. You're going to see a little bit more variation in what the data is kind of looking at and how it's gathered. So for any of these variables, we can hover over the eye again and get more information, get that definition about it. All of you know, when you are creating charts or infographics, if you're going to be sharing multiple variables, especially in a single chart, you'll want to make sure that you select the same kind of output measure. So if one is count, for disagree completely, you're not going to want to choose percentage for agree somewhat, because the chart's not going to make any sense. That's just something to remember, and I've had to remind students of that as they're using this, is to take a look at how your kind of report option you're choosing here. So maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at that index value, or that percentage, for all of these variables. This creating diverse ads for companies is important. I'm going to drag over disagree completely. I'm going to drag over disagree somewhat and append it to the current series. So I'm creating a chart that includes all of the answer options for this variable. This is just giving an example of what it might look like. I'm going to click apply because I'm not really going to spend time making the chart look pretty right now. But here is what this would look like. We can continue adding in more information. Maybe I want to add an infographic.
Well,
So we're looking at.
Can I pause for a second? Looks like
Yes.
we might have a question. Young
Okay.
Park?
Yes.
Yeah. Hello, Jylisa. I'm sorry. So my camera does not work properly.
No worries.
So I have a question. So you just showed the 2024 data.
Yes.
So is it available the previous year, like the 2023 or the?
Right.
Yeah, that is my question.
Yes. So
Thank
let's
you.
go ahead and let's take a look. I'll go ahead and look for, I think it was diverse ads. Okay, so it looks like within Business Analyst, they're really only including that most recent data, which can be, I know, a challenge, especially if you're looking to do comparisons. Some of the variables do have slightly older data, especially when it's the US government data. But for most of the psychographic and behavioral variables, they're going to be sharing that most recent information. So unfortunately, kind of a combination or a comparison with older data doesn't really seem to be available. That's a very good question. Thank you. Okay, So let's just add an infographic just so we can see how this looks. Again, you can port over an infographic that already exists, or you could create your own infographic panel if that was of interest to you. So maybe we want to create a panel that's focused on advertising, since maybe that's what we're looking at. And maybe we'll look at the, we'll do the index value for people who enjoy computer ads, television ads, and mobile ads. So I'm clicking all of those so we have the variable set, and then I will just click on the titles to add these over to selected variables. If you needed to change the way you're reporting that data, you can change it right here before clicking next. We can also then kind of change how this looks, add some different icons to make it look a little nicer than it does here. But I'm going to click save, and I'm just going to say advertising format panel. Once you create an infographic panel like this, you can add it to other infographics that you're using. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add that. And I'm going to click save and just name this Data Hub Tech Talk infographics so we can look at what it looks like for the geographic area that we selected. Okay, so we're going to go back to our map. We have our area here, so I'm going to click on it to select it again, choose infographics, and I'm going to jump down to my infographic and choose the option that we just created. And so here it is looking at that 3, 6, and 9-mile radius from the University of Idaho Library, where they're looking at companies creating diverse ads is important. Again, when we are creating the infographic, we could make it look nicer by changing the title of the chart, changing the colors, changing how the axes appear, and things like that. So this is just a very basic presentation. But it looks like a plurality of folks within 3 miles of who live within 3 miles of the University of Idaho Library agree somewhat that it's important for companies to create diverse ads. But when we look at this 3-mile radius, folks who live in that area are more likely than the US on average to enjoy computer ads and mobile ads, and less likely to enjoy TV ads. Again, if we change that radius, we can see slight differences. Again, they'd probably be larger if we looked at different geographic areas rather than just the mile radius for this option. Any other questions about creating infographics or reports before we move on to creating maps and running some analyses? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm sorry. So kind of following question. So if I'm interested in previous year data, so how can I contact what is the good contact person to ask about the previous data, how to bring the data into this tool?
That might be, I know Bruce is on the call. That might be a question more for Bruce and Norm, who are kind of our main points of contact for the Esri tools. I'm not sure if either of them have any information about that. I know that you can, within this tool, and we're not going to talk about it today, you can add your own data. So if you did have that data available or similar types of data, you could add that in and then kind of use that within your analysis. But I'm not really sure how to kind of get access to the data from Esri's side. Bruce and Norm, do either of you have any ideas?
I think I'd have to go in and test with Business Analyst, but on the back end, ArcGIS Online would be available to upload tabular data if you wanted to do that and store it in ArcGIS Online. And I think where you add your own data set, you could potentially choose a table from ArcGIS Online. I'd have to explore that a little more, though.
Thank you. So
Bruce?
maybe.
Thanks, Bruce. I appreciate that. And thanks for your question. Okay, so let's move on to creating maps. So what I'm going to do before we move on is just clear the map just so that we can start fresh. To do that, there's this little icon, circle with an X on the right side of the browser tool. And so I'm just going to clear that, and I'm going to clear all the sites. You can keep the sites that you're working on the map, and that can often allow you to do more comparisons. So you could potentially compare two different geographic areas or two different areas with the different rings on your infographics or your reports, but we're just going to clear it so we can start fresh.
Before we move on, another question in the chat.
Yes.
The question says, I would like to incorporate the long lat data of the business organizations to understand the supply chain distribution characteristics. Is that possible to do that in this sort of map?
I believe so. I haven't worked with the longitudinal and latitudinal data, but when we kind of select a geography, or even when we select the kind of find a location, you can put in a latitude or longitude, and you can continue to add multiple sites, as many sites as you want, and then kind of do the type of comparison you're wanting to do. The comparison that you mentioned was like supply chain distribution characteristics. I'm unsure what data is available within Business Analyst for that specific type of question. But potentially when you're looking at creating the maps, which is what we're going to talk about, or running the analyses, that might give you some of those features that you're looking at, as long as Business Analyst has the variables that you're interested in. Good question. Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a map. They have three options for creating maps. They have color-coded maps, which allow you to choose one or more variables to analyze. Smart map search, which is choose multiple variables and analyze the areas that match. And then a point of interest search, which allows you to search for businesses and points of interest in your analysis area. This is a good example of the video options that are available for each of these features. So you can watch these for those that I don't cover today. So let's go ahead. I'm going to create a point of interest search. So I'm going to click on that. So from here, we can choose our current geography. So by default, it's looking at where we are right now. But I'm just going to kind of choose, I'm going to go to the zip code level instead of what we see on the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and choose Moscow, and it's going to do that right there. From here is where we can choose the data that we're interested in for this point of interest search. So we could look for businesses based on category, or kind of based on keyword. We can look at category. We can look at NAICS code. We could also choose SIC code if that's what we were interested in looking at. We could also do some advanced searches where maybe we're looking for
Your microphone's gone a bit wonky, as we had feared.
Okay, is it better now?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know, but thank you for telling me, Norm. I appreciate it. We'll choose real estate agents and managers, and then we'll add another condition where maybe we'll say we also then want it to be, we want to look at real estate agents and managers where the employee count is greater than 5. So we can run a search here, and it's going to identify those areas on the map for our geographic location. As we zoom in, we can see those a little bit more. The left-hand side, whenever we're creating maps, will change what those maps look like in the presentation of those, but we're just going to keep it really basic. I minimize this results screen, but this is showing us the top 5 businesses, the top 4 industry descriptions, the different business categories, the average employee count, and average sale volume. This is just a summary. We can look at a histogram, a bubble chart, as well as a table for these businesses. It's going to give us the address, city, some of that geographic information, again, that business information. And as we scroll through, we can start to see the employee count, the sales volume, and things like that. So this is one way to kind of to use that Create Maps feature to look at the businesses in our geographic area or in other geographic areas. You can choose to save this layer, which is the information you've created here, so that you could apply it to future maps if you want to do so in the future. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that. And we're going to create one more map before moving on to a feature and then running analyses. So we're going to create a color-coded map. I'm going to choose the analysis extent as the United States, and we're going to look at counties. We could choose their popular variables, or we could browse all variables and add those in. I'm going to just choose population density for the sake of making it easy here. And again, it's showing us some of this data in summary form. And we could also look at it in a tabular way. So when we come here for this analysis extent, once we've run this map, if we want it to look a little bit nicer than what it does right now, we can say current map extent, and that will allow it to change dynamically as we zoom in and out. So it's going to change from kind of the city or the county level when we're zoomed in really far, if we choose that current map extent, to census block groups, state level, et cetera, as we zoom further out on our map here. As we start doing that again, the data are going to change. The summary changes slightly as well because we're looking at census tracts. But if we zoom back in a little bit, we can get more specific data kind of at the kind of smaller census block group there. Again, we can save that layer if we choose to do so. And if we look at the tabular version of the data, we can export it to Excel. We can also look at the histogram data and change that a little bit too. If we hover over any of these, we're seeing what that population density rate is. And it's being presented in this visual format for comparison purposes as well. So you can do this with any variable that you choose. Some of the popular variables tend to work a little bit better from my testing, but I'd encourage you all to dive into some of the variables that are of most interest to you and use that Create Maps feature, either for businesses and points of interest, the color-coded map, or the Smart Map search, which allows you to compare, to look at multiple variables and identify geographic areas that match the attributes you're applying to those variables. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and clear this map really quick, just so it looks a little bit cleaner than what we're seeing. Another way that you can kind of use the mapping feature within Business Analyst is you can add a web map layer from various ArcGIS tools by clicking Add Data and then Web Maps and Layers. One of the options you can use is maybe the University of Idaho. Some of your colleagues might have created maps that are relevant. But you can also use the Living Atlas, which includes information that might make your map a little bit more appealing or present the information in a slightly different way. So for the Living Atlas, you can filter in various ways. But the one that they suggest using kind of as an example is that you could add the United States county boundary. And so if we check that box and add it to our map, it's going to add that information and it's going to show it in a slightly different way. So it's going to show kind of the counties, kind of once it loads a little bit, drawn out on the map. It's taking a little bit of time kind of doing that dynamic work, but it just presents your map in a slightly different way. And so again, I am not the ArcGIS expert. And so if you're interested in using layers like that or other layers, I'd really encourage you to get in touch with Bruce or with Norm to kind of figure out how you can use some of the more advanced mapping capabilities within Business Analyst than I'm able to share during today's workshop. Okay. Any questions about those Create Map features? Yes.
So I have a question about the ad data. So Okay, so if I'm interested in the satellite data, so how can I, is it possible to combine this? I mean, how is it possible to bring the satellite data into this platform to draw specific kind of characteristics? So my question is it possible to bring other data outside this, platform?
That's a very good question. Um, I think I think it would really depend, and I think I'm going to have to ask Bruce to chime in for that one. If you can add in other types of visual data like that, Bruce.
I'll have to test that a little bit. So you're talking about bringing in like raster layers and that type of thing?
Not sure, but the if I want to, for example, the satellite image data related to the hurricane, and then I want to combine I want to bring the data into this platform. So I'm wondering, is it possible? Well, the other satellite image data.
Yeah, we should be able to add it from, I'd have to check and see what types of layers are available to add, but from that add data tab, we should be able to access other resources out there, web maps and layers. Layers being vector, I'll have to check and see if we could do raster layers there. We'll have to explore that a little bit. But we should be able to bring in other vector data sets and as it shows their import files too. But I'll do a little bit of testing on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. I appreciate you. I appreciate you letting me
Yeah.
leverage your GIS expertise for today's
While I
workshop.
while I got you, could we just the 2003 data, I believe, are available. I think
Oh,
the
good.
two recent years, if you go up to data sources there, where you
Oh,
have
okay.
and the little gear icon next to USA.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
that answers one of the other questions I think that and then previous years you'd have to import yourself.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Bruce, for pointing that out. I appreciate it. Okay, cool. So let's move on to run an analysis. So the analysis tools are going to let you do slightly different things than the create map tools. It's still going to be using the mapping functionality and the variables, but it's just going to allow you to look at the data in slightly different ways. So they offer benchmark comparisons, suitability analysis, void analysis, and threshold areas. So I'm just going to demonstrate two of these. So we're going to do a benchmark comparison. And what we're going to do is first select our location type. So I'm going to choose a geography. And I'm going to say Latah County. I'm going to pull that data. And I can choose the level of detail. So it defaulted to the block group, which might make most sense. If you were looking at kind of a different county where maybe the county had different zip codes or something, you could always choose a different option, but we're just going to stay with the block groups. I'm going to click next, and now I get to choose my analysis criteria. So in this case, maybe what I'll just choose is the income list, and it's going to show us for Latah County some of this data. So we're going to be able to do a benchmark comparison between things like median household income, per capita income, and disposable income for all of those block groups. When we're here, I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we can see it a bit better. This will allow us to kind of see this data in a slightly different way and potentially identify a benchmark. So when we're clicking through here again, on the left-hand side is where we can kind of change how we're looking at the data. And when we click here, we can change how it's comparing. So maybe we can say, I want to look at above and below the benchmark, and I can choose my benchmark location for a specific block group. So we could say, actually, I don't want, we'll zoom in a little bit. I don't want this one to be our block group. Maybe I want our benchmark to actually be this one right here. we can click on that and we can kind of see where that area is and then choose it as our benchmark. It works a little bit better when we were looking at things like city names or zip codes to be able to identify the benchmark area rather than the data that's included here, that location data. But this just allows us to see how things like median household income, per capita income, and disposable income compare to whatever we've identified as the benchmark. Again, we're using the income list as our variable. We could always choose a different variable depending on the data you're interested in and do that benchmark analysis. I just chose the popular variable for the sake of time. Again, when you're looking at the results, you can export those and you can save the layer to reuse it again in the future. Okay, we'll go back and I'm going to clear the map just so it doesn't take as long to run things. We're going to look at one more analysis tool just so you can see how it works slightly differently, the threshold analysis. And then I'll talk about a couple of final features that help you share what you've done in here with others. So within the threshold analysis, we get to select our location, set threshold for the desired areas, and then view the threshold area results. So I'm going to start with a single location just for the sake of time, but you could choose multiple points or existing sites if you had kept those on your map. We've cleared everything each time we've done this, so we're just going to do a single location. Here's where you could potentially do an address, a latitude, or a longitude, or kind of a geographic location. So I'm going to go ahead and do Moscow, kind of just the zip code. I'm going to go next. And now I'm going to look at the population threshold. So this is going to show us kind of how quickly or how far geographically, in this case, we're going to do rings, but you could do drive time. You have to go from the point we've identified to meet the population threshold, in this case, population threshold that you've identified. Depending on your variable, the threshold might be something different. It might not be a number like population. It might be a value like income level. So it might be something like median or average income. So that might be, it might look a little bit different than what we're looking at here. So maybe instead of population, I'm going to browse for a variable. And I'm going to look at, let's just do income for the sake of doing this. And we'll say maybe aggregate disposable income. We'll click that. And maybe we want to see the different thresholds for the disposable income. And maybe our first threshold will be 2,000. Our next threshold will be 6,000. And then our next threshold will be 10,000. And we'll do this as rings with miles. And we'll go ahead and create the areas. This can take a little bit of time depending on like how many thresholds you're creating and how much it kind of has to crunch that data. And we'll see if this works. I was playing with it with some of the variables and couldn't quite get it to render the way that I expected. So we'll see what happens with the aggregate disposable income. As it's finishing setting up the layer. So for threshold 1, and again, this was just kind of the random place that it decided our zip code starts 83843. It's a first location. And so it actually looks like the threshold, and this was my mistake, is rendering a little bit differently. So it's looking at a value of 2,000, but it's showing the threshold is 45,000. So there's some disconnect between how I expected the threshold value to appear and what they're actually showing. And so to fix this, what we would need to do is run this again and dive into how that variable is being presented to make sure we're presenting it in an accurate way. But just for the sake of demonstrating this, here's threshold 1. If we jumped out to threshold 2, it would potentially expand it. But again, since I rendered it incorrectly, it's not really showing us anything of value. So that's something where we could investigate it a little bit more. Maybe look at the video a bit more in depth to see how we can make that work for us. All right, so let's talk about a few other features. I'm just going to clear this before I'm kind of close out the demonstration. Within Business Analyst, you can share the projects you create so that other folks can contribute to them and see them. To do that, you'll click the All Projects 3-bar icon, and you'll click the Share Project with Other Users. That's a different project. By default, it chooses the entire organization. So if you wanted to make this public to other folks at the U of I, you could do that. But you could also add individual users from your organization, clicking that option and then searching for their name. One of the limitations is you can only share it if you're adding a specific individual to someone who has an account within, who has kind of logged into ArcGIS. So if I choose one of my colleagues in the library, I don't know if Pam has an account. She doesn't. I can't share it with her. But if I look for Bruce, I can share this with Bruce and then he can access it. So that's one thing if you are wanting students to use this at all. Maybe they're working on group projects, you would just need to make sure that everyone has access to Business Analyst so that it can be shared with them, or access to kind of the ArcGIS Online and the Business Analyst to make sure it can be shared across a group. Another option, depending on how you want to share the data, is you can share the information you have, share those results to ArcGIS story maps. So we don't have anything on our screen right now, so it's not going to be super interesting, but we can click share results. You could, download a PDF of your map if you wanted to present it this way. You can make it an ArcGIS web map, but you can also use a story map. The story map is a really unique and cool way to present kind of geographic information as well as more contextual information. As I mentioned at the beginning, kind of as we were just chatting, a lot of courses have assignments where students create story maps. We've had past library workshops that talk about story maps. And again, Bruce and Norm and the other folks in the Data Hub can help you kind of learn more about story maps if that's what you're interested in. We're not going to actually go through that process because we have nothing to share. Everything is blank right now, but you would select the sites on your map that you're interested in kind of copying over to a story map, and then you could create your story. So you could take the geographic information and mapping that you've created here and add some more contextual textual information to make it a more engaging way to present this information. Lastly, you can share your results via an ArcGIS dashboard. This would allow you to make some of the infographics and reports and sites that you're creating accessible in a dynamic way online. You can choose to share it as a dashboard, but then not make it publicly available. But if you choose to share it and kind of make it accessible, folks could click a link, access the dashboard you create, and look at the different infographics that you created for the sites or the geographic areas you've identified. This can be, again, a useful way to present the information that might be a little bit more accessible than just sharing PDFs of the infographics that you've generated. But again, since we don't have anything on the screen right now, I'm not going to go ahead and let's see if we might have some sites that are available. We will see. Okay. We'll add a site. Okay, we still have these saved that we had done. So I just want to show you maybe what this will look like so it's a little bit more interesting. And we will just do a test, and we will create this dashboard. So once it's available, it will give us kind of a link to access it right here, and then I'll show you how you can get back to it in the future, which took a little bit of time for me to figure out as I was prepping for this workshop. So while this is loading, again, I've been using this really to kind of generate some of that behavioral and psychographic data. If you all kind of have different uses for that, please explore this resource, get in touch with me, Bruce, Norm, other folks in the Data Hub, and we can do our best to kind of help you understand how best to use this for your needs. So I'm going to go ahead and view the dashboard. So this is going to be those same infographics that we were looking at, but it's presenting it in a slightly more accessible way, because you could share it then with other folks rather than it just being multiple PDFs. We only chose kind of one of those options there, but here is what it looks like for the what's in my community. Because it was only 0.3 miles from the 83843, we're only seeing one thing. If we had had more of those concentric rings or maybe hadn't deleted some of those points on our map, we'd see a more interesting dashboard there. Now, if you want to access this dashboard in the future, what you'll need to do is go back, and I closed out of it. You'll need to go back to kind of the landing page for the ArcGIS tools. And I closed it just so I could see everything at the top of my screen. From here, to get access to those dashboards you created, as well as the other content you're creating, you'll go under Content. And then on the left-hand side is where you're going to see all of the content you're creating. And the infographics are stored under BA, Business Analyst, My Maps. So we can see that test dashboard right here. And this is where we could choose to edit it. We could also change some of the sharing properties if we wanted to. Okay, so with 4 minutes to spare, are there any remaining questions about Business Analyst? I know that was a lot of information at once, but please take advantage of the documentation and videos that are available in Business Analyst. They're really helpful. The guided tours as well kind of step you through a lot of the things that we talked about today in that step-by-step format. Any questions?